If you are joining live or if you're joining on the recording, you are here for Understanding Automations. Let Planning Center work for you. I don't know about you, but when I hear work for me, that sounds amazing. Because if you've been in children's ministry for more than 5 seconds, you know that the admin, digital, like scheduling volunteers, prepping curriculum. There's so many little details that can take up so much of your time. I know so many of our Kidman Academy students are always talking about how scheduling takes them forever, and there's so many things they're trying to work on. And Planning Center has so many incredible hacks, workarounds, workflows that can help make all of that so much simpler. And so they're going to help today show you how to turn some of those routine tasks into hands-off processes that will run in the background. You're going to learn how to trigger actions like sending people to workflows, generating task list items, some incredible things like that, that really are going to help you do a couple of things. You're going to be able to be more hands on with your team because you can focus less on the admin and more on the person. But those workflows and those profile settings help you keep track of your team, especially if you're dealing honestly with more than 30 people. It can be difficult to keep up with all the details of your team. So this is going to help with that. We're super excited to have Aimee and Scott with us today. And I believe Scott is going to be kicking off. So I'm going to take myself off the screen. They may be taking some questions. They're going to run this, but we're keeping an eye on the chat. So, Scott, I will kick it to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. So yeah, we're gonna Amy and I both are gonna talk about automations, and we're gonna be jumping all over the place in Planning Center. So we kind of have a assumption that you kind of are familiar with Planning Center, things like lists and workflows and that kind of stuff. But if you are a little confused, that's okay. You can reach out to our support, or you can ask a question in the chat there. We're going to be watching the chat, hopefully a little bit, and answer any of the questions that you might have on the way. And then also, we're hoping for a little chunk at the very end to answer any questions, not just about automations, but about everything Planning Center. We can do that there at the end as well. All right. So, the roadmap, by the way, for today is first, I'm going to be talking about the anatomy of an automation, like what is an automation, and I'm going to show exactly where they exist. I'm going to show you all the places they exist, and then Amy, the bulk of the time, is going to talk about all the examples. And once you know, you're going to see a whole bunch of really helpful examples, and then we're going to talk about at the end keeping automations healthy, how to make sure that things stay healthy. So yeah. The first thing I want to show, so let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen. Um, yes. All right. So the first thing I want to show is the thing that's the most important with everything Planning Center, which is the support up at the top right. So that is this question mark right here. If you hit that, that has access to all of our support stuff. So you can see your browser documentation. You can have suggested articles. These change based on the page that you're on. So if you're just on a page and you're like lost about what do I do here, chances are if you hit that question mark, there's going to be a suggested article for you. And then we have Learn and Explore, so you can watch like our Planet Center University videos, getting started with things, all that kind of. You can see what's new, what recently released, and then you can contact our email. We'll usually respond to an email within the hour on a business day, so you could probably ask a question right now via that, and you'll get an answer before the end of this. Probably that's how that works. And then the Zoom meeting, if you want to like set up a conversation with a few people, you can set up a Zoom meeting there. You can forget everything else that I say today and Amy says today. If you remember that question mark, you will not be led astray. That is where the magic all is. Okay, so let's talk about what an automation is. And we thought a lot about this, about how do we define what an automation is. And the best we got is it is being able to do a thing based on a thing. That's what we got. Being able to do a thing as based on a thing. So let me show you an example here, and then we're going to walk through all of the places that you can do this. So I want to pull up my VBS class here. And in a lot of different places, there's an automations tab. So this is a registration, and I want to create an automation that anytime someone is registered as a new attendee, as a volunteer with the status of active, then I want to put them into a workflow that they are volunteer onboarding. So What this means is anytime somebody registers as a volunteer, that it'll automatically put them in a workflow in people to make sure that we're keeping track of them. So that was me creating it. I'll go back to automations and you should now see that automation. When a person's registered as new entity, then add them as a workflow. That's the basics of an automation. Yeah, let me just walk you through all. I'm going to be exhaustive here, and I'm going to jump all over the place. But I want you to know kind of the ground floor of all these things. And Amy's going to make it super practical in a minute. So, um, let me show you all the places that automations exist. And there's kind of two ways to think about automation. There's live triggers, and then there are list triggers. So I'm going to go through all the live ones, and then we're going to focus specifically on list. This is a live one. The moment that somebody registers as a volunteer, it will immediately add them into that workflow. That's what I mean by live. So let me show you all of those across all our whole suite. Registrations is one of them. I'm going to jump around here. We're going to go to giving. Where that exists in giving is in manage, and then there's an automations tab right here. And you can see here's actually a good example of a whole bunch of different automations. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I want to add a task when a person gives for the first time, or I want to add a task when they set up a recurring donation or something like that. So there's a bunch of different automations happening at the same time in giving. Let me go then to services, which is where you're probably hopefully scheduling your team. Where automations exist in services is specifically on a team. So I'm going to go to people, teams, and then I'm going to go to, I think it's the check-in stations team here. And there's an automations tab. On that automations tab, you can see that anytime someone's added to this team, I'm going to send an email from a template. So I want just to not confuse you here. Planning center services, when you add somebody to services, it's going to automatically send them an email about how to set up their password and all that kind of stuff. This one is specific to the team. It's things like if someone joins the check-in station team, I want to give them a link to a form to fill something out. I want to give them the access of like all the PDFs and stuff that they need to look at and tell them when they need to show up. Basically kind of the welcome to the team email. That's what that is. All right, let's go to groups. Groups is not very surprising. It is in a group, and there is an automations tab. Here's another really good example of like many different automations that are happening. But I also want to point out that we have incoming automations. So this is really the outgoing automations are things like when someone joins a group, do a thing, or someone leaves a group, do a thing. This one is saying when someone's added to a people list, then add them to this group. And it's really helpful to know that these incoming automations are really helpful if you're trying to figure out why people are being added later. Chances are they might have a automation, and this is a good way to troubleshoot that area of figuring out what is happening. Okay, let's go to calendar. Calendar exists specifically on forms. So I'm going to go to forms and do this community build request form. And there's an automations tab here. So this is saying when somebody submits a form, then I want to add a task to a certain person, the facilities manager, to make sure they follow up with that form. Bunch of different ways to do that. And then speaking of forms, let's go to people. People has forms as well. So I'm going to go to like a connect card in people, and there's an automations tab. Look at that. Okay. I think we're getting it. There's this one is saying when someone fills out a form, then you can send them an email. All right. That is almost the exhaustive and potentially exhausting thing, but just kind of wrap up all the live animations. We have them in calendar. We don't have them in check-ins. We have them in giving groups, people. We don't have them publishing, and we do have them in registrations and services. That's where they exist in all of those places. Now, those are all the live automations. I then want to point out that we have list automations too. These are what, um, yeah, this is like there's kind of two good reasons to do list automations. One is if you have like a rolling thing. Let me say one is if you have a bunch of different rules happening at the same time. So there's this attended Blackwell special life. Sometimes people don't register, but they attend, and sometimes people attend, but they don't check or they register, but they don't check in. So this is a rule set that's saying, give me a list of everybody who has checked in to this membership class or who have registered for this membership class. So that is two different products that we're pulling rules from. And then we can set an automation. Now, I want to point out that this only works if you are auto refreshing the list here. Then, when somebody is added to that group or somebody was added to this list, then it has that automation, and that's pulling back to sending them to the group. All right. The other good reason to have to use lists is if you're having rolling. I'm not going to go through all the examples here, but this is like birthdays next month. If you want to set an automation to like automatically send a birthday email from a template that gives them a coupon for like the treasure trove or something like that, you can have this rolling thing that happens every month, and then it refreshes every month, and then it sends out those emails automatically. Or another good example is like something like missing last 3 weeks. I wanna create an automation when someone misses the last 3 weeks. I wanna make sure I'm following up with them, and that goes into a workflow. Um, so yeah, that's kinda how automations work and where they're at, and I think now it's time for Amy to take over, and she's gonna get super practical with all this.
Okie doke. Okay, here, I'm going to share my screen and then we will jump in and look at some automation. So I want to make sure I do it right. Here we go. Okay, so we're here in registrations, but I'm going to jump over and we're going to look at the people product because I want to start with some list automations. We're going to go through some automations that we hear people ask us about quite a bit. So we tried to go through and like find the ones that a lot of churches ask about. But before we jump in and look at these things, I want to kind of tell you guys I don't know, the mental process I go through whenever I set up an automation. I kind of walk through three different questions in my mind. Question number one is, what's the job to be done? So, for example, I want to follow up with first time guests. That's the job I'm trying to do with this automation. Then the second question I ask is, what do I want to happen? So maybe I want to email these people or give them a phone call or send them a letter in the mail or show up at their house with balloons. Whatever the process is for first time guests, I want to make sure that I do that and that these people aren't falling through the cracks, right? And then the third thing, and this is probably the most important thing that maybe needs the most thought, is does a person need to do this job or is this something that Planning Center can do for me? That's the big question that you need to ask because that's how you can make your automations as efficient as possible. So, if this is something that needs a person to do it, this is a care item, we want to follow up with somebody and kind of have a personal touch and whatever it is that we're trying to do here, I'm probably going to want to use either a reminder or a workflow. And I'll kind of explain what those things are. So we have two tools. If it's something that Planning Center can't do on your behalf, we have reminders in home. And I'll kind of show you what those look like. But just at a glance here, you'll see in the sidebar, I've got this little clipboard, and this is where my reminders live. Automations can actually set these things up for me, it can create these reminders for me. So if this is just a one time thing, that maybe only I need to know about, or you can share task lists in home with other people. So if this is just a one time action that me or someone on my team needs to take and we just need to make sure we do it, that would be a great thing to automate as a reminder in Planning Center Home. You'll see here I've got the send volunteer anniversary card. This is something that a workflow set up for me. Clearly, I'm late on that and I need to do it, but it's a test account. It's just an example. But um, that is one way you can do it. The other way is we have something called workflows, and workflows are these are for multi-step processes that you want to go through in your church. So, for example, if we have a first time guest, we might want to send them a postcard and we do an email with a coffee voucher. And then we do a follow up text. And then maybe a month after they've come and visited our church, maybe we want to do a phone call. So, there's a multi step process here that a person needs to handle because we want to keep this process personal. But I want to make sure that I do all four of these things and I don't want them to fall through the cracks and I don't want to forget. Because in kids ministry, I don't know about you guys, but things get away from me whenever I'm dealing with all the other things that I need to deal with. So those are kind of two tools you have at your disposal if it's something that a person needs to handle. If it's something that Planning Center can handle for you, that's where automations can come into play as well, because we have those one-time actions like showed, or the triggered actions that you can take. So if it's something that center can do on your behalf, like setting a custom field or adding them to a team or group or registering them for something or changing a field on their profile, those are all things you can automate, and then you don't have to think about them anymore. We can just take care of those things for you. So that's kind of the mental process I go through. Now let's actually jump in and let's build some stuff together, because that's how I learn, is like getting in here and just kind of doing it myself. So I'm going to show you what that process looks like. So one of the most common requests we get in our support tickets whenever people are asking about us about automations is following up with first time guests. That's kind of why I went with that example in the start. So we're going to build that together. Now this might look a little different from church to church, but hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of what's possible. And then you can, make it personalized to your church based on the process that you have your first time visitors go through. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into a people list. Now, the reason I'm choosing to use a list is because at my church, we collect first time information in two different places. One of them is at the check in station, because that's where we get a lot of first time families, specifically, is them checking in their kiddos. The other way we do it is we have a connect card, which is a people form. And Scott kind of mentioned people forms earlier. So if they come in, they don't have kiddos, maybe they fill out a connect card. But if they do have kiddos, we actually capture that at the stations. So since I'm looking at two different products, I'm going to use a people list, because that's going to let me look in two different places. That's why I'm choosing to go here. So for example, I'm going to add a rule to find anybody who has first attended any of my events, let's just say in the last week. Now, you could make this a daily thing. You could do in the last month, depending on your process and how frequently you want to follow up with these things. You could change that. It's completely customizable. But I'm looking for anybody who has first attended any of my events, any of my check ins events. They've checked in somewhere in the last week. That's what I'm looking for here. Because I used this since list condition, this is rolling. So I don't have to come in here and update this list to find a new time frame. I'm not giving it a date range. It's just like, hey, in rolling in the last week, has anybody checked in? The next one I'm going to add is we're going to look in the people product, because forms live in people. And I'm going to look for anybody who has filled out, let's actually type it in so we don't have to look through that list, who has filled out my connect card form. I'm also going to put that same time range on it. So since 1 week ago. So this is going to find people who have checked in and have filled out my form, but I don't want people who have done both of those things. I want people who have done either of those things, because I don't want to limit it to people who have only done both. That's going to give me smaller results than I expect. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say, I want people matching any of these conditions. And that's going to change this condition here to an or. So this is people who have checked in for the first time, or they filled out a connect card. Now, some of you might kind of be piecing together that typically it's children who are checking in, right? Unless your church takes attendance for adults and has the adults check in as well. You're probably going to get a mix of kiddos and adults on this list, because the adults are the one filling out the form, but the kiddos are the ones checking in. So there's a couple ways to handle that. But the best one and the most straightforward way is to come down here to my list should include, and we have this. There's a lot of different options in here. The default is exact matches, which means we're going to tell you exactly who did the thing that you're pulling the condition about. But in this instance, I'd probably want to change it to be, give me the household adults of matches. So it's going to go look for anybody who's checked in and anybody who's filled out that form, and it's just going to give me the household adults. If you only want one adult from each household, you could also do primary contact. That's the adult that has, let your church know, hey, I'm the one who would like all the communication from your church. And so they could be the ones that end up in whatever process it is that you're going to set up with your automation. So that's the gist of pulling the people that I'm trying to pull. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save this list. And this is going to go out and find things. Now, this is a good thing to point out. If you don't name your list, we'll name it for you, and it's going to look a little bit silly. So it's usually just in an effort to keep your lists organized and for you to understand what they are, because I wouldn't be able to look back at this and remember what it was pulling. That name is a little silly. So I'm going to name it first time guess. You want to name it something that you're going to remember what it is. There we go. Okay, so now I've got a more helpful title on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to settings. This is kind of step 2 when you're setting up a list automation, is I want to make it so that this list goes out and it finds new results automatically, so that I don't have to come back here and keep refreshing this list. You can set your list to auto refresh, with different frequencies. So because I'm pulling this one weekly, I'm going to say, hey, every Monday, because that's after the weekend, I want you to go out and I want you to see if anybody has filled out that Connect card or checked in for the first time in the last week. And then on Monday, every Monday, automatically, without me having to do anything, I'm going to get a fresh crop of results of my first time guests. So that's one thing that you want to make sure that you turn on. The other thing that we always like to recommend, I'm going to talk about this more a little bit later, is but make sure that you share, if you're going to put an automation on a list, it's a good idea to share it with somebody else at least. I'm just sharing it blanket with all managers in my organization, just so that people managers, so just so that other people are aware that there's an automation running. Because otherwise, sometimes you end up in situations where someone on staff at your church is like, people are getting emails and I do not know how it's happening. It's because there's probably an automation somewhere that maybe you're not aware of. So we always like to heavily encourage people, share those automations with other people. You can sometimes see those incoming automations, like what Scott mentioned, but this is just the easiest way for everybody to understand what is automatically rolling in your church and what processes are automated. So that's the second step. Now we're going to set up our automation. So with our first time guests, this is something that we want to keep a personal touch, right? So this is now we're down to that third question of, is this something Planning Center can handle for us, or is this something that a person needs to handle? And at my church, this is something we want a person to handle. We want a personal touch for our first time guests. We want somebody to reach out to them. And we've got a couple things we want them to go through. I kind of showed you guys that workflow that had like a 4-step process for our first time guests. So I'm going to create an automation that when someone is added to this list, so this is the action that happened, I want to add them to, oh, whoops, not a note, to a workflow. And I have my first time guest workflow right here. There is this option to skip people who have already started or completed this workflow. So if you're running some kind of a system where like people could qualify for the list more than once, you can make sure that you don't end up with somebody going through the process twice. That's an option for you. That wouldn't necessarily apply here, but it's an option if you need it. So I'm going to go ahead and create that automation, and now I'm done. So what's going to happen is every early Monday morning, it's going to go out, it's going to find people that meet my conditions, and it's going to apply this automation, and they're going to automatically get my workflow, and I'm going to get notified that I have some people to follow up with. So that's kind of what the process looks like. Now, because I took the time to explain step by step everything I was doing, that probably felt like it took a while. But honestly, that was a very short and easy process. So I'm going to do a similar example one more time just to show you guys. It's really pretty quick to do these things and set them up. And then you only have to set them up once. So another common example we get is people falling through the cracks. Trying to find families who like were attending and then kind of stopped attending or dropped off, and we want to follow up with those people, make sure that they're okay. So I'm going to go back out and we're going to make another list, our falling through the cracks list. So I'm going to create a new list, and what we're going to do here, because we're looking at a rolling time frame. That's the reason I'm choosing to use a list, is because we want to look at previous attendance over several weeks or months. That's a rolling time frame. We want to make sure we use a list for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look in the check-ins product, because we take attendance in here. And so what I'm going to look for is people who have attended any of my events probably in the last, let's say, 6 months. So this person has come to my church somewhat recently. They have been here, they have shown up, but I want to find people who have not come in the last 4 weeks. So the reason you want to put this top condition in is just to make sure that the person who just came to one Christmas 7 years ago doesn't show up on your list. We want people who have been here somewhat recently, but we want to know people who haven't come maybe in the last 3, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, um, whatever your church determines is kind of like falling through the cracks, or somebody that you'd want to follow up with that feels like they're kind of headed out the back door. So I'm going to add another condition, but just as a shortcut, when you're building lists, if you have two conditions that are very similar to each other, instead of just recreating it from scratch, we do have a little duplicate button right here, and this will save you a lot of time if you're building a lot of lists. So we're going to check people in. We're going to look for people who have checked in anytime in the last 6 months, but they have not. So we're going to exclude people who have come in or who have come in the last 4 weeks. So these are people who have come in the last 6 months, but have not shown up in the last 4 weeks. Maybe I want to follow up with these people. So this is the condition I'm pulling. Now, again, this is probably going to pull me a list of children. At my church, we only check in the kiddos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to return household parents of matches. Give me the parents for this kiddo that are designated in their household. So that is the list I'm going to pull. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit save. And then once we have our list, I didn't name it again, but we're going to want to name it something more helpful, like falling through the cracks. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my settings. I'm going to say, hey, let's do this one nightly because we've got a Tuesday night childcare and we have Wednesday night events and we've got a WANA at some point during the week. And so I would just want this one to run every night to see if anybody qualifies for it because this is something I want to pay attention to very quickly. So I'm going to have this refresh nightly. I'm going to share it with my managers. And then I'm going to hop in here and I'm going to create my automation. This is a personal thing. This is something that I want to follow up with them personally. We have a multi-step process for this just to check on them, maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, add a note to their profile. If they come back and just say, oh, yeah, we're just on vacation this month, or whatever the case may be, maybe we're just busy, we could add a note so that we don't keep bugging them. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add them to my falling through the cracks workflow. I don't want to skip people who have already started or completed this because they might qualify for this list more than once. And I don't want to stop them from showing up on this at some point where they might need us. So I'm going to go ahead and create this automation. And that's the whole process again. That one I still did a little explaining, but like it was a little shorter. And you only have to set these up once and then they just roll. They just continue to roll and you don't really have to look at them again. You're just going to get notified in your workflows when you have people who need your attention. Yeah. So let's move on and look at some more live triggers. These are list triggers, which means they're going to happen whenever the list refreshes weekly or nightly or whatever cadence you choose. But within, Scott was kind of mentioning there are some live triggers around Planning Center. So another example that we get asked about quite a bit is automations attached to people forms. And there's some kind of obvious automations in here, like what Scott showed, but there's a couple little like hidden automation tricks in forms as well that are really cool that I want to make sure and I show you. So I'm going to show you guys a connect card. This is kind of a lot of churches have some concept of a connect card or an I'm new here card or something like that. This particular one is more of a general purpose card. Many ministries in the church use this. It's not just for first time guests, it's also for people who are interested in serving. And it's just kind of the one size fits all form that we give everybody, depending on what they tell us that they're trying to do. Um, because a lot of churches like to do things like that, we have a lot of tools in here to automate different parts of the form to make sure that people are being routed where they need to go. And one of those, and maybe the coolest, I don't know, it's one of my favorites, is called workflow fields. I always tell people this the workflow fields right here, you'll see over here, whenever you drag a field into a form, there's three of them that are considered workflow fields. And this is kind of a secret automation in a trench coat. It's not on the automation tab, but it works like an automation. So, what it does is this checkbox right here, this checkbox field is actually a workflow field. It just looks like a regular checkbox field, but when I click on it, you'll see it says workflow checkboxes. And what it allows me to do is when somebody wants more information about serving in an area, we can list out the different areas. And this is just one example. You could do a lot of things with checkboxes, but if somebody is interested in serving in kids ministry, they're going to get routed to the kids ministry workflow. And if they're interested in serving on the hospitality team, they're going to get sent to the hospitality volunteer onboarding workflow and so on. You can route people to different places based on what they have selected in their form field because different ministry areas typically have different onboarding processes. Again, that's just one example, but this is an automation that's kind of hidden inside of forms here that you can utilize. And it'll just automatically, depending on what people choose, filter them out where they need to go. And again, the proper people will be notified that there's new people that, they need to pay attention to for volunteer onboarding or whatever the case is that you're using it for. Another one that I'd like to show you, and this one is brand new, I think as of last week. We just added the ability, if you go over to the automations tab, you'll see we have just a general automation on this form, which just means, hey, if somebody fills out this form, just blanket statement, I want you to send this follow up email template that we have created called Thank you for filling out a connection card. And it's just the general follow up email for this form. But some people want kind of more specified interaction than that. So we have added the ability to create submissions from certain form responses or automations on certain form responses. So in this automation, I can say when somebody submits this form for a certain response in the form, and then let's look, I had a field in there that says I'm new here. It's just a checkbox. It's just a way for them to let us know that, hey, I'm filling out this form because I'm new. So if somebody actually answers that field specifically, if they check that box, we can take a specific action on them answering that field inside the form. So for example, if they send us if they clicked I'm new here, maybe I want to send them an email, maybe I want to send them to a workflow so that we can follow up with them. But just as an example, I could come in here and I could say, let's send them an email from a template. Here we go. And we're going to send them the welcome email. Welcome to Centerville Church. So if they mark that we're new here, we're going to give them a specialized email. Now, one thing that you'll want to kind of keep in mind is that if you have like a generic email on here and then you have one on a specific field, they are going to get two. So maybe you want to like pick one route or the other. Like if they choose this option, send them this email. And if they choose this other option, send them the other email. And then that way nobody's getting double emails. But that's another kind of new feature in there. Another way you can do an automation within forms specifically based on those like live triggers. Okay, so that is it for my forms example. Now I'm going to jump over and show you an example inside services because I kind of want to show you what it looks like to set one up in a different product. So one thing that we get asked about a lot is, can I do an automation when somebody leaves a services team? And the answer is yes, you can, because there's different kinds of triggers. Before we move on, actually, no, we'll just jump right over there. So, just as a reminder, in services, automations live on the people tab under teams. Automations are attached to teams specifically because that's typically where you're trying to take action is on the people in services. So, we're going to go back to our check in stations to the automations tab. And you'll see when somebody is added to this team, we send them an email that's like, hey, welcome to children's ministry. You're going to get a t-shirt. Here's where you show up the first day, just general joining this team specific information. But sometimes you want an automation to run when they leave a team. And a lot of our live automations have different triggers that you can choose, such as on lists. You could do it when somebody's added to the list or when somebody's removed from the list, because you might want to automate it depending on what this particular thing is actually looking at. So in services, for example, I'm going to create an automation for when someone is removed from this team. You'll see I also have a couple other options, like if they accept a serve request or decline a serve request, we could automate things based on that as well. But for this example, we'll do when someone's removed from the team, I want to set myself a reminder because this is a personal thing for me. I want to make sure that I follow up with them, make sure they're okay, maybe reach out in 2 weeks and see if they want to come back. Who knows? It's kids ministry. Maybe they change their mind. Who knows? But I'm going to set a task for myself to remember to follow up with this person. So I'm going to go to home because that's where my tasks live. And I'm going to add a task and I'm going to name it. This is just for me. Your task list only goes to you. This person is not going to see this. The only time someone else would see this is if you shared a task list with someone else. And then you set this task to go to that shared task list. But for this instance, I'm just adding it to my inbox, which is only for me. So I can name it whatever's helpful for me, is really all I'm trying to say. Whatever you're going to remember what it means, you can fill out here. And I'm just going to say, follow up volunteer. There we go. So I need to follow up with the volunteer. It's going to go to my inbox. I'm going to give it a due date of probably, I don't know, let's just say 2 weeks after this person leaves the team. I want to make sure that I have followed up with them within a 2 week time frame just to see how they're doing. And I'm going to create that automation. So now anytime somebody is removed from a services team, this automation is immediately going to run and I'm going to end up with a task over here in my inbox set with a due date 2 weeks from now, reminding me to reach out to that person. Yeah, so that is an example in a different product of kind of a more live automation. And then for this last one, I have another one that I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to go back to lists. I'm going to preface this is a big example and it's going to look very different from church to church. So think more general. This is something that's possible. But it's probably going to take some fine tuning and thinking through like what interactions do we do at our church? How are people engaging with our church? So you may have put it together already. I'm going to show you a way to track engagement using a combination of lists and automations within your planning center profile. But first, I'm going to start by showing you somebody's profile. So we're going to go to Ashley Johnson. Here we go. And inside Ashley Johnson's profile, you'll see we have this membership field right here. And I have some membership fields. These are customizable. There are some that come with Planning Center, but you can actually change what these say to fit your ministry and your verbiage that you all use for, people's engagement levels. But I've got kind of a scale here that I've put in where I've got core, I've got regular attenders, I've got infrequent attenders, I've got visitors, and then I've got people who are not recently active. Not set is always at the bottom of everybody's. It just means they just don't have one. They're not assigned anything yet. You'll see Ashley is core. This is something that I have automated at my church to pull people based on their activity inside of Planning Center. Now, this is a little bit more complicated to set up, but again, you only have to set it up once and then it just kind of flows and rolls for you, and people's membership types will just be moved between these membership statuses. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. But again, just keep in mind that this is going to look very different from church to church and what's important to your ministry and what things you want to track. So within lists, this is a little housekeeping thing I've done. In the categories, I have listed membership type automations as a category so that I can easily find these if I need to tweak them, pause them, whatever the case is. I want to make sure that I can find these quickly because these are affecting every profile in my database. This is a big automation, right? It's kind of far reaching. So I want to make sure that this is very visible and easy to find quickly. So I've got a little category I've created for it. And you'll see I have 5 lists here, and these lists are pulling the groups of people that meet what my church has defined these tier conditions to be, if that makes sense. So I'll kind of show you what one looks like. This core placement one, this is kind of the top. So in my list conditions, I'm looking for things like they have checked in. They have checked in check-ins, or they have checked someone in. That's a different condition you can pull. They are on a team in services. They have given a gift. They're in a group, or they've asked to join a group. You could add in that they've registered. You could pick anything that you want to do, any kind of activity inside Planning Center. If you have custom fields, you could pull in like they've attended our membership class specifically. Just trying to kind of open your mind to like, there's a lot of things you could pull in here based on what your ministry encourages people to do. And then I'm just pulling people who are matching at least 4 of these conditions. So for core in our church, we say you need to have done at least 4 of these things for us to consider you a core member. I've got a couple different things on here. I want to make sure that these are people who haven't recently filled out my Connect card because that is for first time visitors. And so first time visitors should not be populating on this list. And also we only assign membership to adults. So I'm only pulling adults in this list. So you'll see it's not overly complex, but it did take some fine tuning for me to pick and get right and choose who should be funneling in here. And then I kind of have it as a hierarchy. So on this step down, I've got people, it's pretty much the same list for my regular attenders, but it's people matching 2 of these conditions. So you can kind of tier things down. And then I'll show you guys kind of what the last one looks like, the not recently active. This one almost looks like the inverse of that list, which is these are people who haven't done any of these things. These are people who are completely quiet in my database. They have not done anything in a long time. I've got all of these set to since 12 months ago. So they haven't done anything in the last year inside my Planning Center account. And so they are automatically, because of the automations I have set up, they are going to get stamped with not recently active. So I have 2 automations on every single one of these. They all refresh nightly, like I showed you. And the first automation is when someone's added to this list, I want them to get that not recently active stamp. And then I have a when somebody is removed from this list, I want to unassign that stamp because they're probably going to pop up on another list and they're going to get a new stamp, if that makes sense. So through a 48-hour cycle, they're going to get their new stamp, depending on how the lists refresh. And they'll just be moving through these tiers. And then you can follow up with people. Another thing that you can do with this is I'm going to go back and look at my core one because I have an example set up here as another automation. When somebody's added to the list, they're going to get stamped with core. When somebody is removed from the list, they're going to get unassigned. But if they're removed from the list, I'm also setting up a task list item for me so that I'm notified that, hey, so one of your core members has actually bumped down a status and maybe you want to know about that. Maybe we want to reach out and make sure they're okay and that everything's going all right with them. So that's another thing you can do. The automations here, the possibilities are really very endless. But again, this is just a very high level example of a deeper dive you could take into automations if you guys were interested in setting something like that up. Now, obviously, it's going to take some fine tuning, tweaking. You can reach out to support with your ideas. You can have us take a look at your list and be like, hey, is this going to do what I think it's going to do? We'd be more than happy to look at that stuff with you. But yeah, so that's kind of a larger example just to kind of get your wheels spinning on like you could use automations in even more in-depth way if you wanted to. Before I kind of wrap things up, how are we doing on time? Oh, we're doing great. Okay, sweet. Before I kind of wrap things up, I do want to show you some housekeeping things with automations that we typically like to encourage people with. I've already shown you some of these, but just to button it all up here at the end, automations can kind of get away from you. Like I mentioned earlier, you're in a situation where all of our first time guests are getting an email and we do not know why that's happening. There's probably an automation running somewhere. So to prevent yourself from that kind of, I don't know, trying to track down what's happening, if you can kind of keep these best practices in mind, you'll run into that stuff a little bit less. So, first thing, naming convention for lists. Like I talked about at the beginning, name your list something, helpful that like most people, when they look at it, they would maybe intuitively understand what it does. Like these are my core placement lists. So these are people being placed in the core membership type. I've named it something that would be easy for somebody to kind of understand and intuitively be able to guess what this thing is doing. The other thing is list organization. There's a couple filter things in here that are helpful to you if you ever need to find a bunch of any of your lists that are running automations. You can quickly do that by using this filter right here. Has active automations. If I turn that on, it's going to filter my list down. Now, all of these have automations. Obviously, I just showed you that, but it'll just filter down to lists that have automations actively running on them. And in that way, that helps you kind of filter down. And then hopefully by the list name, you'd be able to pick out the one that you were trying to find. We do also have list categories. So if there are things that you need to be able to grab at a glance, like, hey, we have a lot of automations for our children's ministry volunteers. We automate them into workflows and we automate their background checks and we automate their t shirt size getting stamped in their profile from the form that they filled out, any of that type of thing. You could keep that all together in a category. And then if you need to go looking for any of those automations to tweak them or change the list conditions, you could easily find them here in a category. That's a good reason to do that is just for easy finding. Let's see. Let's make sure that I don't miss anything. Yep, perfect. Okay, and then yeah, the last two things here. One is just make sure you share your list with other people. I know I've said that a couple times, but it really is very important. Make sure you're not the only one that has your list because if for some reason you decide to step down or you're out on vacation, you're the only person that can see that list. It truly lives and dies with you specifically. So make sure that you share it with other people so that you're not the only person that's got the keys to that. And then the last thing is those incoming automations that Scott showed you. There's an example in groups. If you are kind of trying to problem solve, like, hey, how do people in my groups keep getting, let's see, yeah. How do they keep getting added to this group? How are people landing in this group automatically? The group is closed and it has been for a long time. How is this happening? A lot of times, if you will go to the thing that's being affected and look in the automations tab, you'll be able to see if there's something incoming in most circumstances. So that can be a good troubleshooting tool for you if you're trying to like kind of keep things tidy and figure out what's going on. Yeah. So I think that's it for automations examples.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Amy. I think for now, anybody who has any questions, we can try to answer them. And they could be about automations. They can also be about anything in Planning Center that we've recently released or any of that kind of stuff. So please start asking some questions if you have any. But to kind of wrap up some of those things and give you a little bit of encouragement, the best way to think about some of this stuff isn't to try to understand what's all possible and then see how it applies to your life and your ministry. It's better to think about the things that you want to do. What is the job you actually want to do? Start there first. And then there's probably a way to automate that if you start with the action idea first and then, come backwards. So that's the best advice that we can give there. But yeah, that's basically all that we talked about. We talked about what automations are, we showed you where they're at, and then walked through a whole bunch of different examples on things. So yeah, I think we're ready for any questions you might have.
We do have one question in the Q&A section. It says, we'd like to clean our lists up, which is a common request. A lot of people are out there trying to kind of clean their lists up. But we'd like to clean our lists up and we have some inactive team members. How do we do that without removing them completely from Planning Center? That is a excellent question. I think I have an answer for that. But Scott, do you have anything specific on that?
No, I think you're gonna
Okay.
you know what
Yeah.
it is.
We do tell me if there's something. This is something that we're like always working on improving, just because we know it's a little bit of a pain point. But there are some tools to salvage lists that have become unattended, um, just because of people's permissions being removed. So there are some tools in here that will show you if you're an organization administrator lists that are completely unassigned. Like there's nobody in charge of this list, it's just free floating. We also pause automations on unassigned lists now, I believe. So they shouldn't just be running into eternity without anybody watching them. But if you were to go ahead and remove the permissions of those people, you should be able to see in the list section. I'm going to see if we might not have any that are unattended, in which case that folder would be removed. But let me just see if oh yeah, unmanaged lists right here. There's a little filter that I can see. Let's take off this category. Yeah, we don't have any
Good,
because we cleaned them all up because of this
you should
filter.
share your screen though, just real quick. Just
Oh yeah, thank you. Sorry, I forgot I wasn't sharing my screen anymore. Yes, we have an unmanaged. Here we go. So I went to lists and I popped open this little filter in the sidebar. There's a little section right here where you can click and see unmanaged lists that nobody, and then you can take over those lists. We give you the ability to kind of take control of them. So all that to say, if you remove their permissions because they are no longer with you, you can see their kind of unmanaged lists in this section.
yeah, that's great. Also, by the way, if you're looking to know how to ask questions, there are two spots that I just learned about, which is great. The one that should be at the bottom. There's a chat section. You can just ask a question in the chat, and then there's also a Q&A section there, and that's what we just saw there before. The other thing I want to say for Denise too is when you just to I don't know, but be pedantic about completely removing someone from Planning Center, you shouldn't delete a profile or like completely remove them. You do but you can set them as inactive in Planning Center people, and when you set them as inactive, then it removes the permissions from, like, services and that kinda stuff. So, if you're asking specifically, "I wanna, like, clean up my teams and services so we're not getting charged for the amount of people that are in services," set them as inactive in people, and it's gonna still store all of their information or all of their, like, history and stuff.
Mhm.
So, yeah. Also remember, Hannah asked a question at the very beginning before we
Yep.
started recording, which is what is the, what's up with that new fun um decline auto or the decline options that we have. So yeah, uh Amy's going to show this. Actually, Amy, I set this up while you were talking. So if you go to people and go to teams and you can go to that, or sorry, yeah, people in services and
Mhm.
go to teams and then go to the check-in station team just to show you where this at. Under settings, there are two newish things that are really cool to point out. One is the scheduling gap alerts. If you have that on, anytime that somebody has unanswered, like they it's just pending, still they haven't confirmed that they're going to be there, or they are declined and they you still need to fill that position, then your leader is going to get an email alert 2 days before whatever you set that as 2 days before the plan actually starts. So that's really cool. The second thing is this new thing under rescheduling declines, which is basically what happens when someone declines. There is a new option that says volunteer replacement. So go ahead and you can go ahead and turn that on. And what that's going to do is when someone declines, it's going to allow them to choose who their replacement is. So I can show you that if you hover over plans, I think, let's see if this happens, and go to contemporary service. Yep, I am, and that's who Amy signed in. I'm scheduled as the drummer here. So at the top left, it says, "Are you available for drums band?" So if I hit decline now, it will now show me all of the team members who can replace me. So it's just Caitlin right now as the only other drummer. So I can choose her and then hit next, and it just automatically assigns that person. So that's really helpful if you have like a team that you want to make sure they're responsible for finding their own replacement, then you can turn this on, and anytime they decline, they can pick their replacement, and then that replacement will get the scheduling email at that point. So yeah, that's the cool one. Any other questions? Please hit us up. They don't have to be about automations. They could be random services, things like this, or we can just break out if we want as well. I'll be quiet for 10 seconds. All right, we got one. Yes. Okay. Is there a bulk way to inactivate people? We have thousands of people, almost 19,000. That's a large church in our database, and there is no way they are all members. Also, a fast way to duplicate. Yeah, Amy's going to show this. Actually, you want to just take it over?
Sure. Yeah. Can you still see my screen here?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So yes, there is a way to bulk inactivate. This is actually something you cannot automate on purpose. This is something that is not in the automation list because inactivating somebody is slightly destructive. It like shuts off their recurring giving and removes their permissions and does a whole bunch of other things. And sometimes people were setting up lists that were pulling unintentional people into that list, and then it was inactivating people automatically, which, as you can imagine, was a little destructive. So you do need to come in here. This is something that is a manual process, but there is a way to do it with a bulk action. So what you can do anywhere you can find that bulk actions menu, the best and easiest place is probably lists. I'm going to come in here and let's find my, well, I guess it doesn't matter. Here, let's just pick any list. Active attenders. We wouldn't want to inactivate these people, but for the example, what I'm going to do is hit this little pencil right here, and then I'm going to state in people because that's where inactivation happens. And then we are going to set their status. It always takes me a second to see it. Set profile status. There we go. And then we want to set it as inactive. You can choose a reason. These are customizable. You can change these to be whatever makes sense for your church, but we could say they all moved. I don't know why. For whatever reason, a lot of people are just like inactive for more than a year. Sometimes people have a status that looks like that. And then you can choose a date or just leave it as today. And you can choose to clear their membership status as well if you'd like. And you can perform that action. I'm not actually going to do that, but it will go and bulk inactivate people. So a lot of times, what people do if they're trying to look for people in bulk, if you haven't found those people already, is a lot like what I showed here with my no recent, not recently active list. So they'll pull a list that looks a little bit like this. Like these people truly have not done anything in the last year. And then they'll go ahead and go to the results here and they will run a bulk action on this kind of list. I do think we have an example of this kind of list in our support docs under common lists that you can kind of copycat, but you'll want to tweak it and make sure that I would recommend like kind of scanning it, look for familiar names, make sure it's the people you expect, and then go ahead and run that bulk action.
Yeah. And while you can't automate the actual setting them as inactive because we want to make sure a human looks at it, to make sure it's the right thing to do, you can add an automation to like remind you or to go into a workflow to remind somebody else or whatever you want like that. So it is a good way to think about creating a list of those people and then getting an email or a reminder or something automation, and then have that person come in, look that list over, and then do the bulk action, like you said.
Yes. Another thing that I think we hadn't pointed out is that there is also a notification feature on lists. So if you're just wanting to be notified of new people on the list as they come in, you can also add your name right here. So if you did have some kind of inactivation list, you could subscribe to the list results, and then we would tell you when there were new people that you needed to look over. If you do want to like look in depthly at all of their profiles, a workflow is a great option as well because that'll actually give you a card for each individual person. But
The next
yes.
question, that was asked by Tiffany was, fast way to fix duplicates. I wanna talk about duplicates in 2 different ways. One is try to not have them. That's the best way to, like, do this, and that's actually really hard. We found that, like, the most duplicates thing that happens is through registrations,
Mm,
and because people, like, forget which email they use to register, so it creates a duplicate. So sometimes that's part of it, but a way to help prevent that is if you are using the Church Center app, it just automatically signs them in when they go to register, so they don't have to type in their email or anything like that. So any kind of way to keep pushing people to the Church Center app that might help reduce duplicates. Other than that, the best way to do it is on this overview page. There is at the bottom right potential duplicates, and you can hit view duplicates right there. And you kind of have to manually do that. There's not a way to make that fast. But okay, I'm just going to keep going because there's like 3 more questions here. One of them was we're looking to move to Planning Center from a different database software. How long is the onboarding process and how difficult it is to start with a new account? Church is about 350 members. All of this is a little overwhelming for me, and because who hasn't started with Planning Center yet? You joined a tough one for for just very beginning. I would say that there's a lot of different ways that people do this. I think the most successful way that we've seen is people start slowly per product. So if you want to to just start on just check-ins or something like that, start there and don't worry about the rest of planning center. And then once you feel solid about that, then start, scheduling people with services and then start doing giving or, whatnot. So that's one way to do it. You can do the band-aid pull off at the same time, kind of thing. I think if you're especially going from giving, it's important to know that it's usually easier to start on like January 1st. That way you don't have to have two different, reports at the end that get sent to each person through different, products there. So that might help you. Otherwise, the last thing I want to say is um, people have experience doing both. Doing the slow route and the like band-aid this month. Everybody just fill out this form because we're on a new system kind of route. Both work, both are great. If you want very specifically kind of to know what's best for your church, I would set up one of those phone calls with our team and we can walk you through all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, okay, great. Last minute. Oh, no, that I think last minute items. I think that was an AI thing. There's one more question from Susan in Q&A. Oh, I read that one. Okay, we're going back to Q&A. We'd like to clean our list up and nope, I'm sorry. I'm reading answered questions. There's one more question. Here we go. Is there a training or webinar available on optimizing and getting the most out of the Church Center app? It's a great question. We do have that Planning Center University video on, I think there's a publishing one specifically. Aimee, correct me if I'm wrong. But if you go to the publishing, or if you go to the question mark at the top right, yep, and then there is Planning Center University videos. If you click on that, there is Church Center. Great, that's even better. Publishing is the thing that controls how Church Center looks, and then Church Center is the Church Center. So that's why those are a little bit too different and how we talked about it differently.
I will also
Okay.
point out that we do have a specific PCU for children's ministry, and so it talks about everything from kind of a children's ministry lens. That's a helpful one too if you're looking for more resources.
Yeah. Great. Oh, I like this question. Aimee, I think I wanted you to take it too. How would you go about creating and implementing a photo release for kids?
Oh, that is a great question. Let me get back to Planning Center.
While
So,
you get there, I'm gonna answer this other question because it's isn't publishing a separate subscription. It is and it isn't. It is free if all you're doing is changing some of the basics of it. But if you want to have custom pages and you want to do like live updatings, that is a paid subscription at that point. So publishing is free just to get on Church Center and to do basic editing. Okay, go ahead, Aimee.
awesome. Okay, so typically what we recommend for this, and Scott, please feel free to say if there's something else you're thinking. But what we typically recommend for this is using a custom field in People. So we have this custom field right here called for check-ins, and we have a spot in here where we can designate if this person has said whether photos are allowed or not. Now, the thing about this particular custom field is that it is shared with check-ins. Um, Oh, we moved it to the setting just moved, right here where you can
That moved it this morning, by the way. We're always updating y'all.
yes, this is fresh. Anyways, yes, so we are, right here. If we go to for check-ins, there's a little checkbox that says share with check-ins, and what this box allows you to do is surface this, um setting on a check-ins label. So because we have it in a custom field, we can do two things. One, we can collect that data from a people form. So if you have some kind of a people form where people are entering their information for the first time, you can collect that no photo or yes photo permission within the form, and it'll automatically stamp their profile here. Or you can set it manually by coming into their profile. You could do it either way, whatever works for your systems. And then you want to make sure you share it with check-ins because what you can do is add it to a check-ins label. I think we probably have an example of this. Let's see. Potentially.
I think it was one of our default ones, maybe.
Kids ministry name label right here. Yes. Okay. Couldn't remember what it was called, but we have this little box right here that says no photo. And this is looking at a custom field. Photos allowed. So if it is answered yes, or you'd want it when it's answered no. then we're going to write the text no photo and it's going to pop up. We're using this invert color because what happens here is when it's yes, it's just going to be blank. Nothing's going to show up on the label. But if the custom field is answered no, then it's going to say no photo and it's going to pop up with this big black box. So basically, it just makes it easy for your like camera guy walking around where if he sees a big black box on somebody's name tag in that area, that's just an easy signal for him like, oh, I need to make sure I don't include that kiddo in the pictures. But if they don't have that designation in their profile, that box will not be there at all. It'll just look white on their name tag. So we found that's usually the most helpful way to do it. There's a couple other ways you could do it. You could also always reach out to our support team as well if you're looking for more ideas or you want to see if your idea would work. We'd be happy to think through that with you.
Yeah. Perfect. I think there's one last question, and then maybe Hannah, you might need to take over to close us out. But the last question is, if I have a duplicate or trying to clean up a list, is there a way to delete that profile from Planning Center completely, or are the only options inactivate or merge? The answer for that is yes, there is a way to delete. You have to do it manually per profile, though. There's not like a bulk way to delete, because the best option is honestly merging and inactivating. So yeah, but there's your answer. All right. I think that's it for us, Hannah.
Amazing. Okay, I think y'all learned so much today. And the Planning Center team, I hope what you gathered from this is that they are so willing and able to jump in and help. We put some of those links in the chat. PlanningCenter.com will get you to all of the links. But if you scroll down, there's support, there's Planning Center University, all of those different pieces are easily accessible there. And that support team is willing to help you whenever you need it. And they're super engaging, encouraging ministry experience. They know what you're going through and they're here to help. So thank you all for joining. Thank you to Scott and Aimee. We are thankful for you. And that's right, Mandy said they are always so helpful and don't make you feel dumb asking questions. Because there is, in the case of this, there's no dumb question. I know many of us are ministry minded, not always software minded. And so they are here to help us bridge that gap so that, like they said at the beginning, I love what y'all shared about. Does this need to be a person or can Planning Center do it? And so y'all can grow that discernment. And the more you can take that, a software can do for you, the more you can take off your plate, the more free you will be to minister to families and to your volunteers. So thank you everybody for joining. Have a great day, everybody.